Champions are seen by many as the most powerful trainer of each region, and arguably the most satisfying trainer in the game that you defeat, as defeating the champion means that you become the new champion, and the most powerful trainer in the region that you're in. But which champion do I think were the most challenging? Which champion caused the most hassle? And overall, who are the hardest champions in Pokemon? Well, since there are only 8 champions to choose from, I thought just to be safe, why not get the help of a fellow PokeTuber, that being MysticUmbreon.
What is going on, AuraGuardian fans? My name is MysticUmbreon, and I am here to help out Aura with the decision of who the hardest champions are. Champions are meant to be the most challenging part of the main series Pokemon games, and can really give players a run for their money if they're not careful. But what champion battle is the hardest though? Today, we will be discussing just that in our top 5 hardest champion battles. These battles, however, are 100% our opinion, so you guys may have something different than us. And that is okay, because in all honesty, all of these champion battles are intense in their own way. You guys can definitely still tell us what champions you feel are the hardest by sharing with us in the comment section below. With all that being said though, I think it's finally time we started this list.
And with all that out of the way, let's take a look at 5 of the hardest NPCs that you'll most likely come across in any Pokemon game. Our picks for the top 5 hardest Pokemon champions. Number 5. Lance. Now of course there's going to be some people out there who might argue that Lance from Gold, Silver and Crystal wasn't that hard of a champion. His Pokemon are low leveled compared to other champions, and all of his Pokemon share the same flying type, but not Dragon for some reason. Especially, why didn't he have a Kingdra? However, keep in mind, there are only 8 champions to choose from, and when deciding on which champion should be at the bottom of the list, Lance barely just made the cut. Now I personally never had too much trouble with Lance, but I do see why some people would. For one, all of his Pokemon had the move Hyper Beam, which despite having recharge time, was still a very powerful move, acting as a physical attack instead of special attacking at the time, and this benefited Pokemon like Gyarados, Aerodactyl and Dragonite who had very high physical attack. Speaking of Dragonite, Lance had 3 of them, all with different movesets to cover different things, including 2 of them being able to paralyze your Pokemon with Thunder Wave. His team is able to cover almost every weakness each of his Pokemon has, Gyarados for rock types, Charizard and Aerodactyl for ice types, and his Dragonite for dragons. So again, Lance is by no means the most intimidating champion, but the champions are only going to get harder from here.
As a kid, playing Ruby and Sapphire, I mowed down the Elite Four with my team, but when it came to this certain man's team and his powerful steel Pokemon, I was pretty outmatched. All of Steven's Pokemon are literally giant walls of steel, even though some of his Pokemon aren't actually steel types. The defenses and special defenses of Steven's team are actually pretty high up there, but I mean, it is still possible to get past most of them with a proper super effective attack. Although for me, it was easier said than done. I say this because most of Steven's Pokemon had resistances for my super effective attacks. His Claydol also has the moves Light Screen and Reflect. With Light Screen and Reflect up, literally none of my super effective moves were doing nearly enough damage to take them out in one hit. Not to mention his Pokemon had move coverage for just about every super effective Pokemon I had towards them. Once Claydol was taken out though, it was easier to take out Steven's team. I may say it got easier, but that doesn't mean it still wasn't challenging.
Number 3. Iris. So the problem with putting Aldo on the list is that you don't even battle him after you beat the Elite Four in Black and White, but when you do, it's a rematch battle, where your Pokemon are a lot higher level, making Aldo slightly less of a challenge compared to some of the other champions, and we're not taking into account rematch battles with champions, only the first time round, which is why Iris is here instead. Now it's possible some of you might be complaining, why is Iris higher than Lance? Lance is way better! Really? Well, let's take a look at why Iris is where she is on the list. So like Lance, her Pokemon aren't all exclusively Dragon type, except unlike Lance, her Pokemon don't share a single type and weakness. She has a lot more variety and levels. Her Hydreigon has great special attacking coverage, with fire, water and electric moves. Her Aggron can double its speed with Automize, and sweep with double edge that takes no recoil thanks to its rock head ability, and a Dragon Dancing Haxorus that also has the ability to sweep your entire team, which you can't one-shot because the thing is holding a Focus Sash. She also has other strong Pokemon at her disposal, like a Druddigon with a Life Orb, a Rock Sliding Archeops, and a Lapras that can put you to sleep with Sing. Her team is all about power, and the fact that it's overall full of strong Pokemon with strong moves puts her above some of the other champions, and is our pick for the number 3 spot.
This battle is one of the most intense Pokemon battles in any of the Pokemon games. As the main protagonist in Red, Blue, Yellow, and the remakes, the player starts off in Pallet Town. In Pallet Town, they meet their rival Blue. Blue and the player develop an intense rivalry throughout progressing through the game. As the player progresses, them and Blue battle at certain spots in the game to determine which one of them is the better trainer. Even though the player usually wins the battles, the rival always somehow manages to stay ahead. Finally though, towards the end of the game, that gap is then closed. After progressing through the Elite Four, the player is surprised by a surprise champion battle. That champion is their rival, also known as Blue. To me, the champion battle against Blue has always been kind of personal. I say this because throughout the entire game, Blue is constantly a jerk, putting the player down, but I feel that him putting the player down actually pushes the player to try harder. What makes this champion battle so hard though, is the intensity in it. The player has been through so much with this rival, battle after battle, and now it is time to settle the score, once and for all, for the title of champion. This can honestly create a lot of pressure for the player, because they know something very important is on the line. As for the rivals' Pokemon, they consist of a balanced team that no one type can counter. This can make decision making a little harder unless the player has a Pokemon that can counter each one of Blue's Pokemon. Not to mention the level cap of Blue's team is pretty high up there, and at that point in the game, sometimes the players can be a bit underleveled, thus making the battle a little bit harder due to the level difference. With all the personal rivalry, the balance of Blue's team, and the level cap though, I think that this battle is one of the most challenging battles in the main Pokemon series.
And finally, our pick for the #1 hardest Pokemon champion is Diantha. No, just kidding! Oh, X and Y was so easy. What? You still don't know? Guys, #1 is Cynthia, right? Like, I'm pretty sure this is one of the most obvious #1 spots ever. Well, this is pretty anticlimactic. So when making this list, Mystic and I went back and forth quite a few times with some of our picks, but when deciding on who we thought was the hardest champion, there were no questions. In fact, it's not just us who think Cynthia is the hardest champion. Literally everywhere I checked, Cynthia seems to be unanimously picked as the #1 hardest champion. Why? Well, let's take a look. For starters, Cynthia's team is one of the highest level champion teams, as well as being very solid and diverse all around. Any notable weaknesses her team might have, she makes up for at least 2 other Pokemon. Grass weakness? No problem. Ice weakness? No worries. Fire weakness? Ha! Electric? Fighting? Well, she also has a Pokemon that has no weakness. Her Pokemon also had strong movesets. She had Pokemon that would hit hard, Pokemon that were very hard to faint, again Pokemon who at the time had no weakness. Her team seemed to have more synergy than any other champion team. I think another big reason why Cynthia to so many people is the hardest champion was because in Diamond and Pearl, it almost felt like your Pokemon were always 1 or even 2 steps behind every gym leader, Elite Four member, and of course the champion. Well, to me it did anyway. I always remember having to grind if I wanted my Pokemon to be anywhere near the opponent's level, more so than any other Pokemon game. Her team at the time was also the highest level champion team. The only other champion who has a high level is Diantha, but the reason why she was nowhere near as struggling was because 1, her team wasn't as strong in terms of Pokemon, and 2, because in X and Y the player was given the EXP share at the beginning of the game, which always seemed to make your Pokemon overleveled compared to the opponents, which is why so many people found Gen 6 so easy. Diamond and Pearl however didn't have that. We had to earn each individual level ourselves, just to go on and face arguably the toughest NPC battle in all of Pokemon. In fact, even Game Freak saw that Cynthia was such a challenge that they basically nerfed her quite a bit, and pretty much everyone in Pokemon Platinum, making her Pokemon lower level and swapping a Gastrodon out for a Togekiss, giving her a lot more weaknesses. And for those reasons, Cynthia is our pick, and to be honest close to everyone's pick, as the hardest Pokemon champion so far. And that is our list for the top 5 hardest champions in Pokemon. Remember that it's perfectly possible that you could find a specific champion harder or even easier than we did. Except maybe Cynthia. I'm pretty sure everyone found her to be the hardest champion by far. And hopefully in Sun and Moon, we'll get a champion that isn't Diantha. Okay, sorry, no hate to Diantha. I just want a champion that was challenging. Like Cynthia. Massive thanks to Mystic for joining me in this one.
Thank you so much for having me, Aura. These battles were honestly some of the most intense battles I have ever had as a Pokemon player, and I hope that in the future we can have amazing battles just like these ones. Speaking of other amazing battles, Aura and I did the top 5 Elite Four battles over on my channel, where we discussed the most intense battles prior to the champion, because you can't get to the champions without getting past their toughest 4 trainers.
Our collab on his channel will be in the description or on the screen at the end of the video. Hopefully we'll see you guys over on Mystic's channel if you didn't already come from there. Leave a like if you enjoyed, and subscribe for more in the future. But until next time, thank you so much for watching.